is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Polly Middlehurst. Our top stories. Shots in the air and planes on the ground. The Taliban tries to assert control around Kabul airport as the death toll rises to 20. Also today, don't turn natural gas into a geopolitical weapon. Angela Merkel warns Russia not to use the pipeline to punish Ukraine. And students taking tests before schools even started. California students face strict COVID measures as they head back to class for the first time in a year. 7 more people have died in crowds near Kabul airport in Afghanistan as chaos continues for the tens of thousands trying to get out of the country. NATO says 20 people have died there in the last week. Well, the United States has now drafted in commercial airlines such as Delta and United Airlines to help with the evacuation effort. But EU officials say it may be impossible to evacuate everybody who's at risk. Yolo Abdavid has this report.
From eastern Turkey to western Spain, the Afghan crisis is being felt by most NATO member states. Anticipating a new refugee crisis, Turkish authorities are reinforcing their border with Iran to stop an influx of mostly young male Afghans escaping Taliban rule. This plane landing near Kyiv had Ukrainian international and Afghan nationals on board. Already, the US is warning of security threats, and the European Union says it may be impossible to evacuate everyone who could be at risk.
We have representatives from the international media and international humanitarian organizations which were under threat in Afghanistan. Ukraine has helped them to escape and to start a new life in safety.
More than 200 people fleeing the instability arrived in the UK overnight. A military plane landed in central England as the government has promised to resettle up to 5,000 Afghans. A former British Prime Minister who followed the US into war says the decision to abandon the people of Afghanistan is tragic, dangerous and unnecessary, and says that the decision to return Afghanistan to the same group from where the carnage of 9/11 arose seems almost designed to parade our humiliation. Tony Blair goes on to ask, has the West lost its strategic will? Also in London during the weekend, thousands protested against the takeover of Afghanistan and to show solidarity with those opposed to the Taliban. In contrast to chaotic scenes at Kabul airport, life elsewhere is carrying on, but there weren't many customers at this market. One Taliban official urged Afghans to stay to improve the country.
My message to them is to stay inside the country. We have no personal problem with anyone. Amnesty has been given to all government officials, so they should honestly serve the country.
There is just over a week for foreign governments to honour their pledges to bring their citizens home safely and offer safe passage to Afghans who worked for them in the past 20 years. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN.
Well, Taliban leaders are in the Afghan capital, Kabul, where they're aiming to form a new government and a new police force. It comes as Taliban officials say they're meeting former regional governors to seek their cooperation over the coming days. Well, let's get the very latest now on those political developments from Zamarial Ayabasin, who's in Kabul. Zamarial, how close then are the Taliban to forming this new government? The government that we're hearing is Taliban Mark II.
Hello and good evening. The situation on political era seems to be very busy for Taliban leadership. Mullah Abdul Ghani brother is already in Kabul and he has continuously been meeting with former President Hamid Karzai, the High Council for National Reconciliation Chief Dr. Abdullah Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and other prominent politicians of the former government. So they are seeking ways to finally reach a settlement and form a government as soon as possible. I was just talking with Taliban, a political office spokesperson, Dr. Naeem, and he told me that it will take time because everything was sudden and the plan was not it was looking like, and finally it appeared. Dr. Ghani escaped and Kabul collapsed, and they entered an emergency to avoid looting. That's why he believed that we will form the new government, we will accelerate our efforts. And at the same time, with other sources told us that the Taliban commanders will seek cooperation of the former governors and bureaucrats all around the country, more than 20 provinces. That's what's happening in the provinces level, and at the same time, capital Kabul has been witnessing a lot of meetings, and they are discussing the major and priority of the upcoming government, which is establishing a new system in Afghanistan, and they have been engaged already with different parties and political figures in the country.
And they can't really get on with that job, can they, until foreign forces are out of the country? And we understand the Taliban is asking for complete clarity on that. What is the date when this change will fully happen?
Well, it was May 1 at the beginning, and then when Joe Biden joined White House and as a new president, he took more time, and finally 11th of September is the deadline that, according to the information and whatever we have experienced, the Taliban agreed to this deadline. Either they were telling and emphasizing on 1st of May, but they had no attacks on the foreigners or any U.S. forces, NATO forces, and that's why it seems like they are still waiting for the same date, but they are emphasizing they will not tolerate. As I've been talking with the Taliban leadership in Doha since 3 years, and then I've been conducting interviews with several, one of them, particularly their spokesperson, they continuously say, we will not tolerate even one soldier with arms in Afghanistan. That's why they are still keep going on the same path, and we will wait. What is U.S. doing, and the massacre happening in Kabul airport will end, and then we will see things. What will be the reaction of Taliban if there is any forces after 11th of September?
Zamari Al-Abisin in Kabul, thanks very much indeed. Well, the events in Afghanistan are causing concern and anguish for Afghan communities across the United States. It's especially disturbing for those with family members who helped U.S. forces in the country because of the potential threat now from repercussions from the Taliban when they take over. Dan Williams has this report.
The heartbreaking, chaotic scenes around Kabul airport reverberated around the world. But for the Afghan community already living in the US, the images hit closer to home. Nasser Raoufi operates a restaurant on the outskirts of Chicago. He says his family directly helped United States forces. He now fears for their lives.
I receive a lot of calls for my brother, for my sister, for my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, all these things. They are not happy, they are suffering. I read that when the news, which is Taliban is now looking for those people, which is working for the government, for the American, they want to talk to them. That's a scary, thing that they are scared.
US officials are scrambling to help Afghan allies who assisted American forces during the last 20 years. Thousands of Afghan refugees are expected to be granted a special US immigrant visa, and that has put immigration and refugee organizations on standby.
Laura Youngberg is the executive director of MIRA, the Middle Eastern Immigrant and Refugee Alliance. In the last year, the organization has helped some 1,000 families settle in Chicago.
Right now, we're really focused on preparing on our cultural competency side, finding translators, raising funds. Building trust is the most important part of a successful resettlement process. That transition can't happen without trust.
Akram Hanna knows all about that. She and her family moved from Iraq on a special immigrant visa 9 years ago, having worked with US armed forces.
It's very difficult, and what's happening in Afghanistan now is just brought back all of that memories from Iraq and what happened after 2003. I know the situation is scary, it's unsafe, and I believe people, they have no hope to stay there. So that's why they are trying their best just to leave the country. Otherwise, they might lose their life.
In the meantime, the challenges in Afghanistan remain, with essential services under significant pressure.
They don't have no food, no nothing in the house. They don't have nothing. Even the food, and they have everything, no water, no, a shower or anything.
Stay there, stay there.
It has been a chaotic few weeks in Afghanistan, and for so many, including those with links to the US, the outlook remains desperately unclear. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
Well, in news away from Afghanistan, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned Russia not to use its gas pipeline project to Europe as a geopolitical weapon against Ukraine. She made the statement in Kiev after meeting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ms. Merkel is calling on Russia to extend its gas transit deal with Kiev that expires in 2024. Ukraine fears losing transit fees once Nord Stream 2 becomes active in the Baltic Sea. Well, let's get the very latest on that now from Stuart Smith, who's in Moscow. He joins us live. Take us through this conversation then, Stuart. What exactly was said?
Well, the two leaders speaking about Ukraine's two biggest issues right now. One is this Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, but also the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And on the first one, President Zelensky was reminded by Angela Merkel once again that there is a format of talks called the Normandy format between Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France, designed to try and help alleviate the situation in eastern Ukraine, where fighting continues since 2014 with separatists in the region. 13,000 lives lost, and Angela Merkel has said it's a priority for her to try and make a difference in that region before the end of her term in September. On Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline very, very nearly finished, potentially as early as next week and likely to be in operation by the end of the year. And on that, Ukraine, as you said, is slightly concerned that with the ability for Russia to take gas from the country into Europe by avoiding Ukraine, Ukraine loses out on both financial stability in terms of transit fees, but it also, President Volodymyr Zelensky expresses concern about territorial integrity of Ukraine and is concerned that Russia could use the gas pipeline as leverage. So, in return, he has asked Germany, who are the main benefactors of such a project, the Nord Stream 2 project, through the Baltic Sea. He's asked in return for funding, for one, to try and make up the shortfall in rents from the gas pipeline. Germany has offered billions of dollars for a new renewable energy style investment in the country, infrastructure and new forms of energy. But also Germany has offered the ability to impose sanctions on Russia if, in Germany's words, Russia behaves aggressively. Now, the ideal for Ukraine would be that this contract is extended from 2024, meaning that Ukraine is still an important player for Russian gas exports. But if that doesn't happen, Angela Merkel said there could be consequences. Here's what she said earlier.
We agree with the Americans that gas should not be used as a geopolitical weapon. This will be reflected in the question of whether there will be an extension of this amount of the transit contract through Ukraine. The sooner this happens, the better. We have made it clear that we will advocate further sanctions within the European framework if this suspicion that the pipeline is being used as a weapon is substantiated.
Well, Stuart, we know that Angela Merkel met up with President Putin of Russia just a couple of days ago. She's now in Ukraine. This is really strategic stuff here and a very difficult political balancing act for both sides, isn't it?
Indeed it is. We've got the United States involved. It's worried about European energy security. We've got Germany, Ukraine and Russia, all big players in the region. And you must consider, though, that these two politicians, President Vladimir Putin of Russia and Angela Merkel of Germany, are very experienced. Angela Merkel mentioning in the press conference on Friday with President Putin that she's seen him 16 times in 16 years. And she made she did not hesitate to bring up the most controversial issues between Germany and Russia, such as as the Ukraine's territorial integrity, the gas pipeline, and also the imprisonment of anti-corruption campaigner Alexei Navalny. Two very experienced politicians with the ability to make progress on the global stage of a range of issues, including on Afghanistan. Germany calling right now for the repatriation of refugees, but President Putin of Russia earlier bringing up the issue of refugees in a different context. He's concerned that by bringing refugees through Central Asian states as a sort of staging post before they're moved on to Western nations, that potentially opens the door to violent radicals fleeing Taliban rule or taking advantage of the opportunity to flee Taliban rule and then entering Russia through the Central Asian states. So different priorities on the minds of both leaders, but both leaders very experienced and with the ability to make certain important concessions and important decisions about what happens next to Afghanistan.
Stuart Smith, appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed. Still to come here on The World Today. Oh, one-of-a-kind panda turning 1. We'll find out how this birthday bear celebrated later in the show.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
Welcome back. Now, Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has unexpectedly announced he'll resign in November ahead of general elections next year. Löfven, who's been Prime Minister since 2014, was reinstated in July, just weeks after losing a no-confidence vote. The Prime Minister had been struggling to find sufficient backing to pass his budget. Hurricane Grace has left a trail of destruction in Mexico that has killed at least 8 people, 6 of them from one family. Grace was blowing maximum sustained winds of more than 20 kilometres an hour. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison is defending his government's lockdown strategy, saying it'll stay in place until at least 70% of the population is vaccinated against COVID-19. Daily cases have hit a record high at 914 infections. Now, it's been a divisive first week in schools in many parts of the United States, as parents and teachers disagree now on how to safely resume in-person classes. Edis Tiansan visits a school in Los Angeles, one of the nation's largest educational districts, to find out about some of the country's most stringent health guidelines for those returning students.
The excitement of returning to school from summer vacation is multiplied for these children who've had online classes at home away from their friends for over a year.
Makes me happy. They were home too long. They had to be home, but it was hard for her being a single child at home with me. Her mom works, so it's hard. It was hard. She's happy. She's so happy.
But going back to school has never been this complicated. In light of a surge in COVID-19 cases linked to the Delta variant, the Los Angeles School District has taken a series of precautions, including a health check system called Daily Pass.
You got to go to an app and indicate that no one has had contact with anyone who had COVID or no one is exhibiting any COVID symptoms. So you go through the checklist, you hit OK, and then you have to show this barcode to get in. We can't take our kids to their classroom and drop them off by the door. We have to, let them in at the front, which is all, it's precaution, it's good. It's just, some of the drawbacks of the times.
The second largest school system in the United States, Los Angeles Unified School District, is also one of the strictest when it comes to safety guidelines against the spread of coronavirus. Hundreds of thousands of students will be tested regularly every week, and on top of that, they're also expected to wear a mask at all times and wash their hands regularly.
A safe return to in-person education has a high cost for the district. $350 million are spent for 500,000 weekly tests. That's on top of upgraded ventilation systems installed in hundreds of schools, but some are still worried.
I'm just a little worried. I know there's a lot of surges in cases, and so that's scary. I don't want my children to get sick. My son has asthma, and my mom lives with us, and she's older, so that worries me.
More than 3,000 students tested positive ahead of the first week and had to stay home. And a vigorous screening program aims to keep the community spread at bay, but some families are looking forward to vaccine eligibility for their children.
I'd like to see him vaccinated. And I know our son and daughter-in-law would like to see that. So as soon as they approve the vaccine for under 12, I think they'll go ahead and do it.
Some parents hesitate talking about vaccinating their children, and a few have also spoken off the record about their concern over children wearing masks all day. But in Los Angeles, the majority parents and teachers have been all for safety while keeping their children in classrooms. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Now, there are calls for a full ban on the use of chemical pesticides in urban areas and gardens right across the UK. Scientists say the use of pesticides is linked to a decline in insect and bird populations and also affects human health, as Kitty Logan explains.
This garden may seem overgrown, but it hides a rich harvest.
We've got leeks, we've got sweet corn, we've got Jerusalem artichokes.
All grown organically.
Gorgeous, tender runner beans, all pesticide-free.
This carefully cultivated plot is also a haven for bees. But in his latest book, Professor Dave Goulson describes a devastating insect decline. Now he wants an urban pesticide ban to help protect them.
There's clear evidence that pesticides are one of the big drivers of the collapse of insect populations. Which are vitally important creatures. They pollinate our flowers and our crops. They perform all sorts of other really important ecological services.
Commonly used pesticides are poisonous to insects, harming bees and other wildlife which are already in crisis, tipping the delicate balance of biodiversity. If insects die, birds are left without food. And so the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds is joining the call for better pesticide control.
Some of the birds that we find in gardens in the UK are actually declining quite rapidly, like sparrows and starlings, so it's really important that we take the opportunity to make those spaces as friendly to wildlife as possible.
Private pesticide use is widespread in the UK. Many want tidy gardens, spraying to kill weeds. But environmentalists say the cumulative use of pesticides causes uncalculated damage. Local authorities are major pesticide users too, spraying public areas on a large scale. The Pesticide Action Network campaigns against urban pesticide use. This Brighton Park, a pioneer in alternative methods, allowing a more natural environment.
There is no need for them in the urban setting. We need to help urban biodiversity. We need to protect the health and well-being of the citizens that live, work and play in our towns.
Children are also vulnerable to exposure to toxins in pesticides. Here, they can play safely.
Authorities here in Brighton have already agreed to stop the use of pesticides in public spaces, and the differences in this park are already evident. Now, campaigners want to see this pesticide-free policy pushed nationwide. Brighton is among 70 local authorities pledging not to use pesticides, creating a less toxic environment, allowing grass to mingle with weeds. Campaigners argue an untidy garden is better for the environment and that pesticides aren't needed at all.
There's a whole army of beneficial insects, predators of insect pests that in a healthy garden will come to your rescue and get rid of all the pests for you. You really don't need to spray pesticides in your garden.
And the proof is in this greenhouse. With nature allowed to take its course, this crop is even healthier. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Sussex.
Now, the giant panda cub, Xiao Qiji, is celebrating his first birthday at the Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C. in the States. Good wishes are pouring in from around the world, including from China's new ambassador to the U.S., Qin Gang. CGTN's Han Peng has more.
The U.S. National Zoo's baby panda Xiao Qiji is 1 year old. He ate an ice cake as breakfast in front of an excited crowd of American visitors in Washington, D.C. on Saturday.
We drove down to the zoo from Massachusetts just for his birthday.
It's his birthday tomorrow, and the panda's birthday today, and he's a panda enthusiast.
They were endangered, but now they're not, and they eat 40 pounds a day.
The Chinese ambassador to the U.S. sent Xiao Qiji a warm video message.
Hello, Xiao Qiji. As you turn 1 today, let me wish you a very happy and fabulous birthday. Over the past year, with the care and the support from both Chinese and Americans, you have grown from a tiny baby cub to an energetic and curious boy. You also made your public debut not long ago. People have been watching and sharing every step of your life journey and got excited about it. You have truly added a splash of color to the exchanges between Chinese and American people.
Xiao Qiji means a little miracle in English. His mother Mei Xiang was 22 years old when giving birth to him. She's the oldest giant panda in the U.S. to give birth to a baby and second oldest in the world to give birth. She looks happy and proud eating the cake with his son today.
One thing we wanted to do was make sure that our animals were protected because they can be susceptible to COVID as well. The animals don't seem to notice anything different is going on.
A great news for you. Your family in China is also growing bigger and bigger. You are not endangered anymore. But we will protect you as well as before. And I look forward to meeting you in person and in Panda.
The hot weather and also the pandemic cannot prevent people's enthusiasm to come here and take a look at the panda. It is hoped that the birthday of Xiao Qiji and also Ambassador Qin Gang's work here in the United States can create more little miracles in the friendship of the people between China and the United States. Han Peng, CGTN, Washington, D.C.
And that's just about it for The World Today. Thanks very much for watching from all the team here in London. Coming up next on CGTN, it's Razor.